Why did Abraham Lincoln order the execution of 38 Dakota fighters? Yes, in the aftermath of the Dakota War of 1862, President Abraham Lincoln approved the execution of 38 Dakota men, which took place on December 26, 1862, in Mankato, Minnesota, following a mass execution order that also included one later reprieved execution. Lincoln had reviewed the sentences for 303 Dakota men who were sentenced to death by a military commission. He commuted 264 sentences to life imprisonment, but authorized 39 executions, and one of the 39 was later reprieved. Although Abraham Lincoln did approve 39 death sentences, one of the condemned men was ultimately spared. He also prevented the hangings of 264 other Native Americans by commuting their death sentences in the same order. The death sentences did not originate with Lincoln. Rather, the executions were ordered by a military commission and sent to the president, who had the legal authority to approve or decline to approve any or all of the sentences. The Dakota War of 1862 involved a violent uprising by Dakota Sioux, tribal members in Minnesota, in response to hunger and privation, as well as treaty violations on the part of the United States federal government, which had a long history of displacing and exploiting Native American peoples since the birth of the American colonies. The conflict began in August 1862, lasted for 6 weeks, and involved killings, atrocities, and hostage-takings on both sides. On 26 September 1862, the Dakota surrendered at what became known as Camp Release in Minnesota. According to the Minnesota Historical Society, the U.S. forces then commenced military trials for hundreds of captured Dakota fighters. On 9 November 1862, the list of the 303 condemned Dakota fighters was sent to Lincoln for his approval of their executions. 2 days later, he requested a review of their cases and trials. In July 1862, the United States Congress had passed a law relating to court-martials and military commissions, which made it clear that death sentences emerging from such trials could not be carried out without the approval of the President of the United States. In December 1862, Lincoln announced his decision about the issue to the United States Senate, suggesting that the priority of executions should be directed at captives who had committed acts of rape. The President discovered that only 2 of the 303 men had been convicted of rape, and so he widened the criteria for execution to those who had committed massacres, as opposed to just taking part in battles. In the end, one of the 39 condemned men had his death sentence commuted, and the executions of the remaining 38 Dakota fighters took place on 26 December 1862 in Mankato, Minnesota. On December 26, 1862, 38 Dakota men were hanged at Mankato at 10 a.m. On December 26, 38 Dakota prisoners were led to a scaffold specially constructed for their execution. One had been given a reprieve at the last minute. An estimated 4,000 spectators crammed the streets of Mankato and surrounding land. Colonel Stephen Miller, charged with keeping the peace in the days leading up to the hangings, had declared martial law and had banned the sale and consumption of alcohol within a 10-mile radius of the town. As the men took their assigned places on the scaffold, they sang a Dakota song as white muslin coverings were pulled over their faces. Drumbeats signaled the start of the execution. The men grasped each other's hands. With a single blow from an axe, the rope that held the platform was cut. Captain William Dooley, who had lost several members of his family in the attack on the Lake Shetek settlement, cut the rope. After dangling from the scaffold for a half hour, the men's bodies were cut down and hauled to a shallow mass grave on a sandbar between Mankato's main street and the Minnesota River. Before morning, most of the bodies had been dug up and taken by physicians for use as medical cadavers. Following the mass execution on December 26, it was discovered that 2 men had been mistakenly hanged. Wikanpi Wastadampi, Chank Washtadonpi, who went by the common name of Kaski, meaning firstborn son, reportedly stepped forward when the name Kasky was called and was then separated for execution from the other prisoners. The other, Wasikun, was a young white man who had been adopted by the Dakota at an early age. Wasikun had been acquitted,